So we're going to go ahead now and look at 1.4, which is signed numbers. We're going to learn how to add or subtract numbers from each other. So let's work with something that we already know how to work with. How would you simplify 10 minus 5? Okay, well, we know that's pretty easy. 10 minus 5, what's 10 minus 5? Okay, 10 minus 5 is a 5. Now let's examine this a little bit more to make sure we understand why this is a positive 5. When I look at these numbers, I've got 10 and I've got a negative 5. Now, they are different signs, and which one is bigger? 10 or 5? 10 is bigger. 10 was positive, so I subtracted them, and my answer was positive because the 10 was positive. The larger number was positive. What about this one? If I gave you minus 11 plus 2, how would you handle this problem? It's going to be a negative 9. You did it correctly, and let's understand why. Okay, let's understand first why we subtracted them. Okay, they're different signs, right? Which one's larger, 11 or 2? 11 is the larger, well, just look at the number. Don't worry about the sign, just look at the number. 11's the larger number, and what's the sign of the larger number? Negative. So that means my answer has to be negative. Okay, let's try another one here. How about 12 minus 18? What would that be? Well, let's think about a moment with our signs. Is it going to be a positive number or a negative number? Negative number. Why is it going to be negative? Because which one is bigger, 12 or 18? 18 is the larger number, and what's the sign associated with the larger number? So I know my answer is going to be negative. And now we're looking at 18 minus 12, right? And 18 minus 12, well, 18 minus 12 is a 6. We know our sign's going to be negative, so my answer there would be a negative 6. Do you see how I'm looking at these? When they're different signs, we're going to subtract them, and we're looking at the absolute value, because the absolute value of 18 is 18. We're subtracting them. So when they're different signs, we look at the larger number first, and that tells me now what the sign will be. And then we simply subtract them. So let's do one more just to make sure, and then we'll look at what happens when the signs are the same. So how about we look at minus 20 plus 25. Minus 20 plus 25. Well, these signs are different, aren't they? One is positive, one is negative. Which one is bigger, 25 or 20? 25. What's the sign of the 25? Positive. So that means my answer is going to be positive. Now we just subtract them. And what is 25 minus 20? 5. So your answer on that one would be a positive 5. So the larger number controls the sign. So when they are different signs, we subtract. Now, what happens when they are the same sign? They're going to go together. So different signs, we subtract. And the larger number is the sign of the answer. Now, what happens if they have the same sign? If they have the same sign, then they add together. Let's look at positive numbers first, just so you understand how these work. Okay, we know how this one works. 10 plus 5. Okay, well, 10 plus 5, that makes it a what? 15. Now, why is it 15? Why did you add them together? They're the same, right? They are both positive numbers, so they add together. What about minus 12 minus 3? How would this work? Well, they are the same signs, right? They are both negative numbers. So my answer would be negative because they're the same. And then I simply add them together. What is 12 plus 3? 15. So my answer would be a negative 15. Now, here's how I can explain it with money. Let's say my account is overdrawn by $12. So I have a negative $12 balance. And I go buy another $3 item. Once I purchase that $3 item, I'm actually have a deficit of what now? $15, right? So negative value, we're taking more out of it, makes it a larger negative number. So let's do some more of these just to make sure we have them down. 8, and let's put a minus 8 up front, and how about a minus 20? What would that be? Minus 8 minus 20. Okay, these are the same signs, so we add them together. They're going to be 28, and what's the common sign? Negative. So that would come out to be a negative 28. So when they're the same signs, they add together. So same signs mean they add together, and the sign is what the common sign is. So if they're both negative, they come out negative. So if they're both negative, the answer is negative. And if they are both positive, and this is adding or subtracting, then the answer is positive. And we know that, and that would make sense already. We're not multiplying, right? If I put parentheses around it, that means multiplying, and that's the next section. So this is how these numbers work. Now let's look at some fractions. Fractions are going to work the same way. When we add or subtract fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So we're going to add or subtract here. Minus 8/7. How about plus 12/3? Now, we cannot cross multiply. We cannot do that. We are adding or subtracting. When you add or subtract, you have to have a least common denominator, or LCD. So the least common denominator of 7 and 3 would be what? 21. Because 21 goes into 3, and 21 goes into 7. So we want the denominator to be the same. Now we've got that 21, so we're going to have to multiply. 7 times what number would make it a 21? 3, so we need a 3 over 3. 3 times what number makes it 21? 7, so we use a 7 over 7. Now we go ahead and multiply. So negative 8 times a positive 3, that makes it a negative 24. And 3 times 7 is a what? 21. The next one, we've got 7 times 12. And use a calculator if you need to, so don't make a mistake. 7 times 12 is an 84. 3 times 7 is a 21. I've seen students make this mistake before. The denominators do not get added together. So my common denominator is a 21. Now, what are we doing here? Let's look at our signs. One is positive, one is negative, so we're going to subtract them. Which number is larger, 84 or 24? 84. So that means my answer is going to be what, positive or negative? Positive. So now we've got 84 minus 24. That leaves you then with a 60. In some cases, we might be able to reduce, and I think we can reduce in this one. So we've got our 60 over 21. You always need to make sure that you can't reduce it down. So let's look. 21 has a 7 and a 3 in it. Does 60 have a 3 in it? Yep, because 60 divided by 3 is what? 20. Okay, so I can reduce this down by using 3's. So this would then reduce down to be 20 over what? 7. Because these have 3's in common. 3 is in 60, and a 3 is also in that 21. So that would then reduce down to be 20 over 7. We cannot go any further. Why not? Okay, yep, because 20 has, what, 2, 4, and 5 in it, and 7 does have none of those in common. 7 won't break down. Let's do another one. Then we'll talk about mixed fractions. How about minus 15 over 4 minus 9 halves? Same directions, add or subtract. We need a least common denominator. And what's the least common denominator I'm going to be using? 4 and 2, these are pretty simple to work with. 4 and 2 have a least common denominator of what? Okay. Won't be 2. We want the largest one, or the smallest one that's in both. 2 doesn't go into 4, right? So what we need is a 4, right? Because 4 goes into 4 itself one time. 4 goes into 2 twice. So the least common denominator would be a 4. Okay, negative 15 over 4, that one's done because it already has that 4 for my denominator. What about the negative 9 over 2? Bless you. Okay, negative 9 over 2, well, it needs to have a 4 down below, so it needs a 2 over what? 2. Now we can rewrite this. And that's going to equal now a minus 15 over 4 minus 9 times 2 is 18 over 4. So what do we know about the signs here? They're the same. My denominator is going to be 4. So a lot of times I like to just get that denominator first so we don't make a mistake with it. They have the same denominator, so 4 is going to be not my denominator. What are these both? They are the same signs, right? They're both negative, so what does that tell me now? They're going to be added together, right? They're the same, so they go together. 15 and 18, add those together, and that gives you now a what? Negative 33. And why is it negative? Yep, because of the same signs, and they're going to be added together. And my sign is a negative because both of them are negative. And the easiest way to remember that is just remember, if you're in debt and you take out more and you buy more items, what does that make it? More debt, right? So that's how I remember it, is negative numbers are just debt. And if you have debt and you buy more items, you're in further debt, which means the numbers are bigger. Now let's talk about mixed fractions. And we're going to talk about how these mixed fractions are going to work. Now, a mixed fraction has a whole part and a fractional part. So this would be an example of a mixed fraction. 3½ That's a mixed fraction. 5 1/4, mixed fraction. 8 3/7, mixed fraction. So these are examples of mixed fractions. Okay, up here, these are called improper fractions because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. We don't really use that term a lot. Once in a while, though, we do say mixed fractions. And a mixed fraction just means you have a whole number out in front and a fraction behind it. Now, these are kind of tricky sometimes to work with, because mixed fractions, we have to handle them separately from the whole part from the fractional part. So let's add or subtract some mixed fractions. So we're going to either add or subtract these. Now, mixed fractions, what we do is we look at the whole part first, we put those together, then we work with the fractions, and then we put it all back together.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Is that 5 1/4 or 5 3/4?
Sorry, that should be 5 1/4. And all I'm talking about here, on this one, this is 5 1/4 here, and this is 5 3/4 here. Sorry about that, Margaret. Or MJ, I bet you were looking at this one. So
Okay.
we've got 3 1/9 plus 5 3/4 there.
Oh, I see the ones above where it's at.
Yep. These were just examples. And when I say mixed fraction, that means you have a whole number in front and a fractional part behind it. And we don't use mixed fractions very often, but sometimes with applications we may encounter them. So when we want to add or subtract these, we break them up into the whole part and the fractional part. So for the whole parts, okay, and the sign stays the same. So for the whole parts, what's in between them is a positive number. So that's going to be 3 plus 5, and that comes out to then be 8. So the whole part is going to be an 8. Then we work with our fractions. And for the fractions, we have 1/9 plus 3/4. Here's where students make a mistake. I see this happen all the time. Students look at this and they think we can cancel the 3 and the 9. We cannot do that. Why not? This is not multiplication. What is this? This is addition. So for addition, we're going to have a least common denominator. And 9 and 4 have nothing in common. So the least common denominator of 9 and 4 would be 9 times 4, which is 36. Now we need to get our common denominator. So we need here, a 9's down below, so we need a 4 over 4. And for this one, we need a 9 over 9. Now we're going to multiply. 4 times 1 is a 4. 4 times 9 is a 36. 9 times 3 is a 27. 4 times 9 is a 36. Now we're going to add these together. Common denominator is going to be a 36. So always write that down first so we don't accidentally make a mistake there. So the common denominator is a 36. Now what are we doing? We're just adding, right? These have the same denominators now. These are the same signs, so we just add across. And 4 plus 27, well, that is a what? 31. And the reason why I'm writing it like this is sometimes you may have to work with it more. But in this case, we don't. We can put them together, and we can write this as a new mixed fraction. And as a new mixed fraction, that would be 8 and 31 over 36. So we can rewrite that as a brand new mixed fraction there. Let's do a couple more of these. Fractions are where we struggle, so we're going to do a lot of these. That's why we did a lot of fraction ones earlier. We're going to do more of them today as well. So again, add or subtract. And how about we look at minus 9 and 5/7. minus 10 and 3/7. All right, so I want to work with this one. And what's the first thing I need to do? Yep, whole numbers always go together first, and the sign goes with them. So we always keep the signs with these. So minus 9 minus 10, that makes that part then a minus 19. That's the whole part. They're the same sign, so they add together, and they are negative, so my sign stays negative. Now, what about the fractions? And I made this one on purpose to illustrate a fact here. So when we're going to look at the fractions.
Where should you subtract the cross since the denominator is the same?
Yep, that's what we're going to do. We're going to write them out first, though. This one does have an extra step. So the denominators are the same. So we have a minus, and the signs go with them. So we have a minus 5/7. Sign goes with it, minus 3/7. And that comes out to now be a minus 8/7. We need to make this now a mixed fraction because we want our answer as a mixed fraction. Because minus 7/8 is not correct as it is because what do we know about the 8 and the 7? The 8's on the top and the 8 is larger. So we can rewrite this as a mixed fraction. And we can rewrite this as minus 1 and 1/8. How did I know it was going to be minus 1 and 1/8? Right, because what I look for is I look and I see my numerator, the top number is larger. And it's larger, so I can't have that. So I've got to bring out my whole number in front. And what's 8 minus 7? 1, so that's where the 1 is, left over here. And the 1 came out. Now we can put these together. We have a minus 19 and a minus 1. Whole parts go together. That makes it a minus 20 and 1/8. So your final answer would be minus 20 and 1/8. Let's work with converting improper fractions to mixed fractions, just to make sure we can convert these. Let's say I give you 80 over 80 over 7. And I want you to convert this to a mixed fraction. Okay, so 80 over 7 is not a mixed fraction right now. Right now it's an improper fraction, okay, because which one is larger? 80, and where is it at? It's on the numerator. Now I want to make sure that I get a mixed fraction. So how would I convert that? Well, the way you can convert it is what I do is I just use a calculator and I divide. Okay, what is 80 divided by 7? If we use a calculator, I don't care about the decimal. I just want to know what number's in front. So what number's in front? 11. So that's going to come out as 11 for the whole part. And what do we know? Okay, so the 11 is coming out. And we're going to check. What is 7 times 11? Because that's the whole part. 7 times 11, that is a what? 77. Okay, and now we subtract them to get the fractional part that's left. What is now 80 minus 77? 3. So that would convert out to be 11 and 3/7. You can check, because what's 11 times 7? 77. 77 plus 3 gives you what? 80. We're going to do several of these so we get used to converting them. Whenever it says write your answers in mixed fraction, you've got to convert them. Otherwise, you can keep them as an improper fraction. Mm-hmm.
Why
Okay, this one?
1/8?
Okay, why did we put the 1/8 here?
Yeah.
When I looked at this one, we have a minus 7/8. Okay, now when we want our answer as a mixed fraction, the numerator, the top number cannot be bigger than the smaller number. So then I look at it and I say, okay, so how is this going to work? And I'll do this one with the calculator so you'll see it as well. What's 8 divided by 7? That's that. Okay, now the number out in front, that corresponds with the 1 there. And then what is, oh, it should be a 7. My mistake there. Yeah, I wrote it wrong. My mistake. I just wrote it down wrong. Sorry about that. I had the 7s in my mind. It should be a 7. I didn't even notice. Sorry about that. It should be a 7. That was my mistake there. Okay, now does that make better sense? Yep, sorry about that. That was my mistake and I wasn't careful there. Okay, so let's try another one. How about 25 over 4? What would 25 over 4 reduce down to? Let's work it out. 25 divided by 4, 6.25. So what number is going to go out in front? 6. Now we multiply the 6 times the 4. So 6 times the 4, number down below, what is that? 24. And what's 25 minus 24? 1. So what would this be? 6 and what? 1/4. What about a negative 5 over 2? What would that convert into? Well, we know my sign's going to be negative. And we take 5 divided by 2. What's 5 divided by 2? 2.5. So what number is going out in front? 2. Okay, and then we multiply. 2 times 2 makes it a what? 2 times 2 is a, yep, 4. Sorry about that. And yep, the answer is going to be 1, but we'll work this out. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, and 5 minus 4 is a 1. So that's going to be minus 2 and what? 1/2. One more just to make sure before we move on here. How about minus 9/5? What would minus 9/5 be? I'll let you work that out. See, what's my sign going to be? Positive or negative? Negative. Okay, and what number's going out in front? What's my whole part? 1. Okay, and what's going to be left over? Yep, 4. So that's minus 1 and what? 4/5. How did you get that 4/5? Well, you took your 5 and you multiplied it by 1, and that is a 5. And then 9 minus 5 makes it a what? 4. Now let's go the other way. Let's convert a mixed fraction to an improper fraction, because we're going to have to do that in the next section. When you multiply, you have to convert them the other way. How would I convert this one to an improper fraction? And an improper fraction is what we normally work with. And an improper fraction, the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So we have a common denominator of 5. So my answer is always going to have that denominator of 5 here, in this case. And I take 9 times your 5 and add it to the 3. 9 times 5 is a 45, plus 3 makes it then a 48 over 5, right? Okay, we're going to convert another one. How about a minus 3 2/7? My denominator would be a 7. We know it's going to be negative because this number begins in negative. And what do? Well, we know our answer is going to be negative here. So we have a 3 times 7. That's a 21, right? 3 times 7 is 21. And they're both negative. We're going to add that 2 to it. And so now we get a minus 23 over what? 7. They just add together because they're all negative. So those go together. And that makes that now a minus 23 over 7. And sometimes you have to convert them from one to the other. So in some cases, they may have you convert it to a mixed fraction for your answer. Some cases, you can leave it as an improper. Normally, we leave them as improper, but there are some cases where you might have to have a mixed fraction. If your problem has mixed fractions, you have to have a mixed fraction answer. That one won't reduce. Why will this not reduce? Now, if this was a 21, it would reduce, right? But 23 and 7, they have nothing in common. And we're going to be covering fractions a lot more throughout this course, too. I'm just giving you the very basics of them right now. Let's do another one here where we have a double sign. One more of these. How about 9 and 3/10 minus a plus 10 and 2/5. And in some cases, there may be extra signs that you don't need. There is no number between these two signs, so these two signs can go together. What's a positive times a negative? A positive times a negative is going to make it stay negative. So those can go together, and we don't need our parentheses anymore. Because those can go together. And again, we're going to be adding or subtracting. So we need to put these together. We're going to look at our whole part first. What about the whole numbers? What do we have? We have 9 minus 10. And 9 minus 10 would make that answer then what? Negative 1. So that's going to come down for the whole part. Now, what about the fractions? For the fractions, we have, watch your signs here, we have 3/10 minus 2/5. The signs go together, so that negative goes with the fraction as well. We need to put these together, so the least common denominator of 10 and 5 would be what? 10. 3/10 already has a 10 with it. What about the 2/5? We need to multiply it by what? 2 over 2. Now we have 3/10 minus 4/10, and when we subtract them, what does that give you? 3 minus 1, we know it's going to be over 10, so always put the 10 down below. That's our common denominator. 3 minus 4, that makes it a minus 1. Now we can finish it because these are the same. So those can go together, and that makes my answer minus 1 and 1/10 there. They just go together.
I'm kind of confused on
Sure.
we only do the 2 over 2 and we multiply that with 2 over 5 and not like on the other side how we do the other.
Okay, why we don't need to multiply this one by anything? Because this one already has the same denominator. So if it's already got the 10, we don't have to do anything. We could use a 1 over 1, but why write that? When it's already the same, we're done with it. Because that's our common. Does that make that more sense now? Okay. Yeah, if they're already the same, then you don't have to do anything. Because that's our common denominator, and that one already has that same denominator. So we don't have to do anything. Let's look at another one. And this next one's going to introduce a new concept where we have to borrow. Okay, that's going to make that positive 5 and let's say 3/4 here. Because this one's going to make us borrow. This is going to introduce a new concept. And again, directions are going to be the same, add or subtract. This also introduces a new concept with the double signs. Now, we'll learn more about this in the next section, but they all kind of go together. When we multiply, okay, what do we know about the double signs here? Is there a number between those double signs? No. And a negative times a negative makes it now a positive. So you can do this when there's no sign in between, because that's multiplication. So a negative and a negative is going to make this now a positive. Now we're going to go ahead and put these together. So let's watch our signs and be very careful. We're going to now work with the whole numbers. -8 plus 5. Well, -8 plus 5, that leaves you with a what? A -3, isn't it? Why is it going to be negative? Because watch your signs again. The 8's the larger number. Okay? It's negative, so my answer is negative. Now we want to put our fractions together. For the fractions, we have a -7/3 because that sign goes with it. And we're going to add to that 3/4. What's the least common denominator of 7 and 4? 28. They have nothing in common. Now, in this case, we're going to have to multiply both fractions by something, right? Because neither one of them are this 28. So what do I need to multiply 7 by to make it a 28? 4/4. And what do I need to multiply 4 by to make it a 28? 7/7. And I picked this one on purpose to illustrate a new concept that we're going to have to work with. 4 times a -3, well, that's a -12 on the top, on the numerator. 4 times 7, that's 28. We're going to put that together with 3 times 7 is a 21. Down below, we have a 28. Adding those together, they're different signs, right? So they subtract from each other. Which one is larger? 21, it's positive, so my answer is going to be positive. And now we just subtract them. 21 minus 12 should be a 9. So my answer is going to be now 9/28. Okay, now this does introduce a new concept here. On the last one, I could put these together into one mixed fraction because the signs were the same, right? They were both negative, so they went together there. These are not. I need to borrow to make it work. So in this case, I need to borrow from this 3. So I can work with my fractions. Because this one's positive, this one is negative. Or sorry, this one's negative, this one's positive. So what I can do is I can borrow from that 3. Because I can write 3 as this. -3 is the same as -2 and 28/28. Why am I doing that? I need to combine it with this one, okay? Now, what do we know about 28/28? 28 over 28, when those numerator and denominator are the same, it's a what? 1. So I can rewrite this now as a minus 2 and 28 over 28. So I had to borrow. Why did I borrow? So now I can work with these fractions, right? Because again, one of these is positive, the other one's negative. This one's negative. Now let's work with it like we normally would. We can finish it from here. This one's negative, this one's positive. Let's work with our fractions. What about minus 28 over 28 plus 9 over 28? These have the same, what again? Denominator. So minus 28 plus 9, that makes it now a minus what? These are the same. Which one's larger? 28, so my sign's negative. And 28 minus 9, that makes it a what? 19 over 28. Okay, those went together. Okay, now we can finish it because now everything is negative, so those can go together. And that's going to be a minus 2 and 19 over what? 28. I know it's kind of cumbersome to write it this way, but I think it kind of makes sense. So why did I have to do this? What's different about this one versus the last one? Okay, in the last one, when we got to this step, those were the same signs, right? Minus 1 is negative, and minus 1/10 is negative. So those could go together and make it minus 1 and 1/10. Is everyone okay with that? These cannot go together. Why not? Why can these just not go together and make it minus 3 and 9/28? They can't go together because the signs are what? Are different. Okay? This one's negative, this one's positive. So I need to put them together. And how do I do that? I have to borrow from that negative 3. So I can borrow 1 from that negative 3, and that's going to make that a minus 2. And I'm taking 1 from it, and that's going to leave you then with a 28 over 28. Why 28 over 28? Because I want a common denominator of a 28 here. So I took that away from there. Then I can take those, and I can work with these over here and get the minus 19 over 28, and those can go together. Let's look at one more where we put these together, and then we'll take a short break, come back, finish this up, and do the next section. This is the harder section, by the way. The next section is actually quite a bit easier. And the only hard part is the fractions. That's where it gets confusing. Otherwise, it's not confusing. It's just whenever we work with fractions, students always get confused. But let's do one more. We're going to go ahead and combine these together, so add or subtract. So let's say I just give you a minus 5 plus 4/9. These cannot just be added together, can they? These can't be put together. Why not? Because they're different signs. Okay? So we need to put this number and this number together. How are we going to do that? We're going to have to borrow from the whole number. So how do we borrow from that negative 5? Well, I can borrow from it, and that's going to make that minus 4 and 9 over 9. Because 9 over 9 is what? 1. So we had to borrow from that 5 to make that 9 over 9. Now we can put these together. And what do we have now? Okay, now we've got, for the fractions, because we don't have any whole numbers, but for the fractions, we have a minus 9 over 9 and a positive 4 over 9. Minus 9 plus 4. What's my sign going to be? Positive or negative? Negative. And 9 minus 4, that makes it a 5/9. So now we have minus 4. Okay, that's my whole part. We put those together. And a minus 5/9. Those are now the same. So what's my answer as a mixed fraction going to be? Minus 4 and what? 5/9. When you put it all together. we had to borrow. So we had to borrow from the 5, so we made that a 4. We got our 9 over 9. Why 9 over 9? Because that has a 9 here, so we want a common denominator, and then we can put them together, and that gives us that. Let's go ahead now and take a short break. We'll come back. We'll finish up this section, which there's very, very little left to do, and then we'll look at the next one. Fractions are where we struggle, and that's why we're spending a lot of time on the fractions. Whole numbers are not difficult at all. So let's meet back here at, let's say, 10 o'clock. So let's meet back here at 10 o'clock.